Hey there, it's Jeff Luther, and you are diving into the podcast for the Service Business Blueprint. This is where I walk with you and help you unlock the secrets to building a thriving service-based business. We talk about everything from starting out to setting milestones in your company you didn't even know would exist. We'll cover entrepreneurship, personal growth, mindset, everything you need for success in your service-based business. You ready to build that blueprint? All right, welcome back to the Service Business Blueprint, where we share tools, tips, and insider information to help you achieve your personal and your business goals and overcome mindset obstacles. And as entrepreneurs, like all humans, we often face those obstacles. I'm your host, Jeff Luther, and today I think we're all super lucky to have a really sharp guest with us, Cameron Madill. Along with his wife, Anna, they work with couples in strengthening and maintaining, which I think is important, healthy and lasting relationships. And I can attest to Cameron's expertise specifically around entrepreneur couples. Unfortunately, Anna's not here with us today, but Cameron has 5 certifications from the Gottman Institute. He's trained in nonviolent communication. He's a forum moderator trained and trained in crucial conversations. I want to put a pin in that, Cameron, and go back to crucial conversations if we have time. He's co-authored at least 3 published academic papers on this topic. And what's important for us all to understand is this is not just something that Cameron has studied and now talks about. He's co-founded 3 nonprofits. He's the co-founder of an award-winning web design agency, bless you,
Thank you.
that he led through a successful employee ownership conversion in 2020, which is no small feat. And his wife, Anna, she's also founder and CEO of an award-winning digital marketing agency. And they're both in it. And they have a kid. And Cameron's starting his master's in positive psychology. You're a busy dude. Thank you so much for carving out the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's great to be on.
So I know that you and Anna both live the, we'll call it the dream of entrepreneurship. So you're going to have a lot to share. I can't hear what you have to say. You have such an interesting background, both you and Anna, with success in business. Where I'm so curious, where did you start to get off on the path of being interested in couples and couples therapy? Where did that start?
Yeah, if I had to pick one kind of like moment of truth or an inflection point, it was, I guess it would have been in my early 30s. So I'm 40. How old am I? 45 now. I should know this, right, Jeff? Showing my age.
Yeah.
And I was at the end of a relationship that was maybe a year and a half. And it was just kind of, let's just say, going really poorly. And I had a moment where I think I sort of figuratively looked in the mirror, where I love to learn, Jeff. Like learning, I think, as you know, it's just a lifelong passion of mine. I've just always been driven by curiosity. That's why I'm going back to get my master's. And I was kind of known as the guy, I would always read at least a book a week. And, people would be like, hey, have you read X? And if I hadn't, I'd buy it, I'd read it. We'd talk about it a month later. And I realized, okay, I'm in this relationship. It's not going well. It was kind of in this like almost terminal decline where it wasn't horrible, but it just kept getting a little bit worse. And I realized, man, I must have done myself brain damage from reading hundreds and hundreds of business books. And I have not read a single, not a zip, zilch, zero, a single book on relationships in my entire life. I haven't even read a blog post. I haven't even listened to a podcast. And so I just kind of had this moment where it was like, why do I think that relationships are different than anything else in my life? Like, why do I think I should just be God's gift to relationships and be incredible at them with zero knowledge, practice, intentionality? Like, that makes there's nothing in my life I'm just magically amazing at. I might have a little talent, but there's nothing I'm good at without intentional work. And somehow I had this just belief, that I'm just such a great guy. I should know how to do relationships naturally.
That's so fascinating. I made a note here because entrepreneurs, that personality is all, I'm painting with a broad brush, but that personality is always, if somebody else can do it, I can do it.
Yep.
Right? It's got to be easy. I'll do it myself. And then there's the pride factor too. So that's fascinating. Um, I'm really excited about this topic. And look, I have a tendency to get carried away. So tell me this first. If folks are going to like what you have to say here, if they want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way?
Yeah, the easiest way is my website is cameronmadill.com. And that's got, contact information for me. You can also find me on LinkedIn, uh, carrier pigeon, fax machine, whatever works for you.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll do your pager number at the end, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um,
But yeah, I love hearing from folks. This is kind of my life passion. So please reach out if you got questions.
cool. I want to point out that you've been working on a project. I think you're interviewing 100 couples. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, how's that going?
It's
And that's for your book.
Yeah, yeah, great question. So, yeah, this project started a year ago, and I actually just finished, Jeff. So it feels great because it's been a lot. It's been a lot of work. It was a lot harder than I thought, but I
Yeah.
did interviewed 100 couples for 1 hour each, and then I ran them all through an assessment, which you had mentioned this in the beginning, but one of my favorite frameworks is the Gottman method, which is this kind of amazing kind of research driven approach towards couples, work, and relationships. And they have this assessment called the Sound Relationship House. So I've been doing all these interviews, taking all the notes and organizing them. And the goal, which I'm just starting now, is to turn that into a book. And I've been giving talks around this topic of just kind of like, we entrepreneurs we're special good, and sometimes special not so good. But like we're not boring. I think that's one thing that everyone can agree upon. And so I wanted to know,
Yeah.
what is the impact on a relationship when one or both partners own their own business? Because it just seems like it puts some unique dynamics for the couple to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If time allows, I would like to give kind of my experience in that arena, but also I think what's important, a lot of our listeners are um, one man operators or what's considered a mom and pop shop, and that's not derogatory at all, but it's solopreneurs or
Yep.
the
Yep.
sole proprietor. And oftentimes, particularly in the home inspection business, you have the home inspector that starts out doing home inspection, does everything on his own, and then gets busier and busier, can't answer the phone. So then the wife will start answering the phone. And I don't mean that that's a sexist role. It's just kind of how it goes. Um, I could never do that. Like I hear about that, and I know those guys that do it, and it mortifies me. This is a really huge question, so we may need to refine this down. But some questions I have around that is how do you how do you separate your work and your personal? Like where would you start if a couple comes to you and they say, hey Cameron, look, we've been working together for the last 3 years. She answers the phone, I do the work. We work 6 days a week, and then we work on Sunday to get prepared for the week or whatever it is. Where would you start by saying, okay, you're having problems in your marriage? Let me ask you this. Is that too big? Is that question too big?
No, I love it. This is a good question. Okay, so where would I start? Um, I think the first question I would ask is, what kind of rituals and structures do you have to your relationship? Not to your life, not to your business, not to your broader family, but for the two of you, what are kind of the intentional rituals, traditions, patterns that you have set up? And then I would start examining them because I'm a big fan of, and I think you've heard me talk about this, Jeff, of this idea of small bigs, this idea that there are sometimes these small things we can do in life that have a big impact. And of course, it's great if we could all invest 20 hours a week in our relationship, but the reality is, you know, we probably can't. Like we probably would be doing that if we could, because we got other problems. Maybe it's business problems, maybe it's the kids, maybe it's, taking care of mom and dad, whatever it might be. And and it's often this idea. So there's this beautiful framing of what's the difference between a ritual and a routine. Have you heard this?
I have not, but I think I have. I think I know something
You're,
about
you're
it.
you're picking up
You
what I'm putting
go
down,
ahead.
right? It's
Yeah.
intentionality, right? It's meaning. So,
Yeah.
every morning we wake up. We have a routine. We wake up every morning, right? Every morning we part from our spouse, most likely, right? Even like my wife and I both work from home now, but like she works, she's got her own office, I got my own office. And so can we turn that into a ritual? Can we turn that into a 6-second kiss? Or I'll give you another example. Sometimes my wife and I are a little bit, let's just say sparky in the morning, right? And one of the things we found that really helped, because, one or both of us would often wake up and we're going. We got things we want to do. Maybe we're stressed about something, whatever it would be. And we just set a ritual of every morning, the first thing we do when we see each other, because sometimes we wake up at the same time and sometimes not. We give each other a hug. We just give each other like a 10, 20-second hug. And then we can get to like, this morning there were ants in the bathroom, right? And it didn't, Anna didn't like it. Makes sense, right? Like, and did you call the exterminators, or do we have an ant trap? And you can get into all that stuff, but by just creating these little rituals, taking routines that are already there and infusing them with some meaning, we can kind of shift the whole tone of our relationship.
Yeah.
And I guess to
Yeah.
build on that, there's kind of this concept of the intentional family contrasted with the entropic family, like entropy, randomness. And so it's just that, like, the default state in our society with all the noise and chaos and devices, and it's just like, we're not living in some, village in 15th century Europe or whatever. Everything's just kind of structured for us. So like we have to build that intentionality, and it doesn't necessarily mean a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my big takeaway when you first started talking was intentional. A lot of times we're not intentional. It's just that motion going forward, dealing with the ants in the bathroom. Um, so what I see, this is the part that scrambles my emotion and scrambles my brain when we start talking about working with our spouse.
Yeah.
I can tell you, so I'm an avid fisherman. I've been fishing all my life. I've owned a boat since I was, I don't know, 30 or so 20 years.
Yep.
And I will tell you, the best fights I've ever seen in my life ever are at the boat ramp with a husband and a wife.
Really? All right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It is amazing. But it's because they have a common goal, right? They're both rowing in the same direction. They both have a goal. But when something goes wrong, whose fault is it?
Okay.
It's the other person's fault. You didn't back the trailer down far enough, or you didn't move it over to the left far enough, or you're not going fast enough, or you came in sideways. You didn't account for the current. It's this constant back and forth of because your jobs are so different.
Yep.
So that's what I relate this whole working together thing to. There's always a scapegoat. You always blame the other person. And then I worry about holidays. Like, what do you do if you work together and now you've got 3 days off? Like Thanksgiving holiday, you got Thursday to Sunday. This could probably go back to intentional, but if someone comes to you, like, I would say, oh my gosh, Cameron, I'm about to have 4 days off with my wife, and I don't know what to do. We're going to kill one another. What do you do?
Well, that's a good question. I've never heard that exact question, but I do think, yeah, those kind of transitions from work to home, especially for, well, all couples, but especially for couples who work together, figuring out what those boundaries are. Because some of the couples I interviewed, they work on the weekend or they work on nights, and other couples they don't. But I think getting really clear on what those boundaries are, which is a version of what we learn in business, right? Like, what hat am I wearing right now? And then,
Yeah.
I think as far as uh, someone says they're going to kill each other if they spend 4 days together. Why? I guess I'd want to know why. Is that because they don't like each other? They don't have shared interests? They can't be apart? Like, what's the problem there?
So now there's a void because you normally you would have those you'd have those 96 hours, and half of them are going to be filled in with work problems, and then all of
Yeah,
a sudden,
got
so you
it.
have all this dust,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Now all of a sudden the dust settles, and where's the focus? And I'm speaking only on from my experience,
But I hear this a lot. Now all of a sudden the dust has settled. It's like, I mean, it's a
Yeah, yeah,
very, very, very condensed empty nester syndrome.
I
The
agree with
kids are
it.
gone. Now what do we do?
Yeah, and you got that. Yeah, like work creates all this structure, and you just don't have that much time. So I think the most basic answer here. There's you mentioned one of the many frameworks I've messed around with is called nonviolent communication, and at its core, it's just
Yeah.
kind of this notion that we spend a lot of time stuck in like arguing, litigating what the facts are, and talking about what we don't want, and we don't spend enough time talking about the heart of what matters in life, which is what are we feeling, emotionally in our bodies, and what are our needs, like not getting into the specifics, but what are our needs. um and so that's where it's like ideally you would have a conversation about that right at the beginning of like, hey, we got this empty space, and we don't have any plans, we don't have that structure we normally do. And I think each person taking a little bit of time to check in into like, what am I feeling, and then especially like what are my needs for these next 96 hours. Do I need connection time? Do I need stimulation? Do I need peacefulness? And by the way, you can just Google nonviolent communication needs list, and there's a list of like 60. So you don't need to push yourself, but like, and needs can be a negative term for some folks. So it could be desires or however you want to think about it. But it's basically like at a broad level, yeah. Do I need a lot of stimulation? Do I need some downtime? Do I need some physical activity? Do I want family time with the kids and my spouse? Do I want quality time with just my spouse? Do I want time in nature? Do I want time in commerce? Whatever it might be, just kind of getting all those out there. And then once you put them on the table, then you can typically you can really quickly make plans. Then it's like, oh, okay, cool. So you want some time alone and you want some physical activity, and I hate physical activity. So why don't you go for a run or do whatever, right? Or maybe we both love physical
Yeah.
activity, and I'm not as excited as you, but I'd be happy to go along with you, and we can get some quality time together. Like those things typically get real easy once you can get clarity on the deeper needs versus like not having a plan, which is not a good formula. It's not intentional.
Right.
Or the other thing that happens often, right, is we get into this fight about the content of something. Like, like I really want to do the 5K run on Sunday. And it's like without talking about kind of what that represents, like, so what does that represent? Is it like athletic accomplishment? Is it athletic activity, period? Is it uh, a shared event with my partner? Is it doing an athletic event and having my family there to celebrate me at the finish line? Like you really lose sight of all those when you just get stuck on I want X to happen instead of connecting with the deeper needs underneath it. So that'd be my starting point. That always works magic.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I want to move into communication, and this kind of struck some questions for me. So communication at work, you're in a limited time window. Let's say that the restaurant that you service, they call and their AC is down, and the husband, the wife, they have to communicate really quickly and matter of fact of, well, you need to stop having lunch, or you need to do whatever, stop whatever it is that you're doing, and you have to get over to that restaurant that we service because that's our bread and butter, and you need to do it now. So in a work environment under the gun, I think that's acceptable. Have you found that couples let that bleed over into their personal life, where I need my golf pants now, to stop what you're doing and get them out of the dryer, or whatever that is? I'm reaching for an example,
Yeah,
but does my question make sense?
absolutely. So here's what I've seen with in my interviews, I broke them down into four kinds of couples. And I'll just quick share them because I talk about them like cocktails. And so basically the notion is that if you've got an entrepreneur, we're like a stiff drink. And the partner adds their own unique mix, but there's kind of four main mixes that happen. The four types are the Moscow Mule, which is where you have two entrepreneurs with two companies. Um, Martinis, which is I think most of this audience, where we have two people working in the same company. Manhattans, where you have an entrepreneur and a professional, so kind of the more steady job and the more volatile but hopefully high upside job. And then lastly, the mimosas, where you have an entrepreneur and a stay-at-home partner. So for those martinis, where you have two people working together, I mean, generally what I see is the couples who thrive. It's pretty cool to watch, Jeff, because they basically have said, all right, we're throwing everything in the same basket, right? We're not just going to be, lovers and friends and co-parents and, you know, family members. We're also going to be like business partners or coworkers. I mean, it's like, holy heck, you're really going all in. So what's cool is a lot of those couples, when they sort of look at the learnings in both areas and apply them, they seem to get really skilled at being together because they have no choice. And those who don't, I think, as you said, they kind of exacerbate that pain. So if they have an unskillful way of communicating at work, they have an unskillful way of communicating at home, and it can kind of really amp itself up. So, and I think the key point there you said is, or and the word I want to highlight is skillful communication does not mean slow communication. It can, but like
Ah,
what I always go back to, so I mean, right, if it's just like it's one thing to say, let's say you're working with your partner to say, you know, oh my God, my love, I'm super stressed. I just heard from the big client and their HVAC is out. I got to leave lunch right now. Can you please, do whatever needs to be done on this front? I love you so much. I can't wait to see you tonight. Like, I mean, what did I add? Like 15 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds?
yeah, you added 3 words.
Yeah, I use the word love a lot, right?
Well, yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's my love, and then I love you so much. Yeah.
so I mean that's
So,
that's probably a lot more skillful, and we could come up with a lot of hypothetical scenarios, but that's not necessarily slower. And I also think that, I mean, I always ask people this question, like, think about a time when you have had just a really bad fight with your partner. Something goes really wrong. And when we talk about not having the time to work on our relationship, or not having the interest, I mean, my God, right? The emotional, mental turmoil, how much time is lost from a really bad fight? At least for me, I know I have a hard time sleeping. I've got ruminations going on in my head constantly. I think I'm less productive and focused at work. I think I'm less able to enjoy my time with my friends. Worst case scenario, I might start complaining about my partner to my friends and go down this kind of negative gossip loop. I mean,
yep.
it's the most spectacularly inefficient way to live our lives. We really might as well just be single at that point. I know that's probably a dark thing to say, but so that's where I just think, like,
Yeah.
that not undervaluing small additional pieces of time and working on some of these skills, because I just think we delude ourselves. It's kind of like trying to stuff the jester back in the pop-up bottle or whatever. When we don't
Right.
have harmony with our partner, that thing's gonna pop back out at some point and scare the crap out of us. um and so I think it is something you can have both. And the last thing I want to add on this, there's a really interesting insight from this therapist, Terry Real. He's an East Coast guy, and he's got a method I've trained in called relational life therapy. And one of the things he talks about with professional couples, so I think is really relevant to this audience, is that they often come in and they're frustrated and they're like, I just can't listen to my wife, or I just can't, listen to my husband, or whatever. There's, I don't have those skills. I can't, make this work. And what he'll do is he works on something he calls skill transference. And so he tries to find a place where people do that, and they usually do successfully at work, right? So even if you're like barking at your spouse and you work together, like, do you bark at your clients, right? Like, if your client says,
Right.
and let's just say your client's a little unskillful, right? Would you like throw a drink in their face, or, call them a four-letter word? Like, probably not, right? So one of the best ways that we can grow as couples, and this is what I think these couples who work together do really well when they do it, is they've got this cycle between work and home, and they're continually learning in both places of like, got it. So when my client was like super grumpy at me, I took a breath and I slowed down. I didn't immediately attack, and I said, well, tell me more about what happened or whatever, right? And they're using these skills of effective communication in a different context. And then when they realize that, they can start to apply it at home. And then I think that virtuous cycle can just keep going both ways, because then the more skillful we get at home, that stuff can really pay off in spades at work as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, And then do you ever advise the couples, whether it be they work in the business together or two that are entrepreneurs, do you ever advise setting time aside to discuss business at home? Like okay, if it's overflowing into our personal life, let's set aside 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60, whatever it is. Is that advisable, or do you try to draw that line when you pull in the driveway?
I think it's absolutely advisable. I think every couple is different. Every business is different. I mean, one of the things that I haven't seen really definitive research on this, but I think there's a strong analogy between starting a company and having a child. And there's just probably a general strong analogy between having a company and having a child of
Yeah.
companies are they're kind of greedy. They're kind of needy. Sometimes they're great, and they make us good money and we get to have a pretty relaxed life. But like, as you kind of alluded to, hey, if you're the business owner and your big client calls with their HVAC out at their restaurant and it's Sunday and it's the day, like you don't get to say like, oh, sorry, it's a weekend. That's what you sign up for when you're the owner. And so of course that ripples into your personal life. And I think it's all about figuring out, getting back to those needs. And a lot of us, like, we love to work, right? So maybe you love to work. And I would say absolutely it's what's important is that it's intentional. And I think what's hard is the chaos. And so if it's like, you know what, we're just in a phase of 50-hour weeks or whatever, and then I just talking that through, and maybe what feels good is, hey, we're not going to work Sundays except for emergencies, but we're going to block out 4 hours, Saturday morning for me and 4 hours Saturday afternoon for the spouse or whatever. Like yeah, so it doesn't matter, but just
Yeah.
having clear agreements that you do have some boundaries, and the boundaries fit where your life is at today, because it's not realistic to think we can behave like an hourly employee at Starbucks. That's not what we signed up for.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of this that you're saying, it leads back to that word intentional, right?
It's all it's at the heart of everything. Jeff, you said let's hear your experience. You were talking about your story, so let's share your story.
Yeah, so here's one thing that I want to ask or want to address for the entrepreneur. This is for the mimosa, where you have the entrepreneur and then
Yeah.
you have the other parent that stay at home or whatever it is. So things that I know I run into, things that I know other business owners have run into, is you come home, you've had your 8, 10, 12-hour day or whatever it is, the week. You come home and then you want to talk about whatever happened. Okay, well, did you know that our insurance is going to be raised or
Mm.
whatever the issue is? Then you have the partner that wants to opine and they want to help, or
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Of course.
nothing
Of course.
about the business. And so then the entrepreneur gets frustrated because the partner's telling them what to do. It's like forum. I know you're moderator trained, right? It's like in forum. Don't take the bait. Um, so then they're telling the entrepreneur what to do, how to solve the problem, but they're doing it with good intention. Is good intention. They want to help. So how do you have that conversation where really what you want to say is what you're telling me is not helpful, so let's just change the subject.
Yeah, I mean, so here's what's funny, Jeff. I've now studied and gotten certifications in three different modes of therapy, and I've studied a lot more generally couples therapy. They all say, do not give your partner advice. This is like relationship 101. This is stuff I didn't know because I never read anything, again, not even a blog post. But this is not high
Right.
level stuff. So the
Yeah.
first thing is to say on either end, because by the way, right, let's say your partner's at home because they got their own job or they're stay at home and they start sharing about their day. Don't give them advice either. Don't do it. We don't
Right.
want to hear it. We don't want to hear it from our partner. We don't really want to hear it from most people, but especially from our partner. What we want is actually looking for connection and support. And so the first thing you can do is, if you're on the receiving end and someone starts just coming at you with some stuff and you don't quite know why, this is a question my mom used to use. I'll give you an even better version, actually. This is the one I use with my son. Do you want to be helped? Do you want a hug, or do you want to be heard? The three H's, right? Everything applies
Ah.
from parenting to couples, right? But that, my mom would always just ask too. I love this. She had her own version. So, do you just want to vent for a while, or do you want my help? And usually what I wanted was just to like bitch and moan and complain. And it was a brilliant question,
Yeah.
right? Because, man, if my mom had started giving me advice, oh, I would have, how dare you? I'm a grown man, or, whatever, I'm a grown teenager. So I think that is the number one thing, is knowing that if you're on the receiving end, that your partner just doesn't know what they want. And the best thing you can do is slow it down by asking that question, do you want help? Do you want a hug? Do you want to be heard? And then if you're the person who's sharing, it's real easy, right? You know this, Jeff. You just say, hey, I've got something I'm really wrestling with, but I'm not looking for help. I just really want to be heard. I don't have anyone else to talk to about this. I know I can solve it. I'm just frustrated, and I want to be able to process with like curiosity and support from, my love.
Yeah. So yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Because in my mind, like I know that to be true, but what we forget is to preface before we say it. I assume the person already knows. They already know that I don't want advice. They already know I just want to vent. But then
Yeah.
I'm putting the burden on them. Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Yep.
And I think oftentimes we get into situations where also we want to be right. Like particularly two entrepreneurs with two different businesses, there's probably that struggle for power, right? Like who's the smarter entrepreneur? Um, and then you don't say anything, and then a couple of days later you have the opportunity to say, "Yeah, I told you so," or "I knew that was going to happen."
Yeah.
That's
I
the
mean,
best one.
you know, that's a hard one, and I agree. I'm particularly interested in the what we call them the Moscow Mules, the two entrepreneurs, because that's me and Anna. And one of the cool things is we really can help each other out sometimes. So there's times where I think we're both just
Yeah,
like, this is amazing. I'd be paying thousands of dollars for this kind of consulting or coaching. And then there are definitely times where it's like, I do not want, I do not want your
right.
help on
Yeah,
this. I want support.
yeah,
Um, and I've seen that with, but I think in any case like that, that's what I think having that acceptance for our partner that they're on our own journey. They are evolving, right? But it's very true that we change less in a year than we think, and we change a lot more than we think in a decade. And so when we're in a relationship, seeing each other every day, it can feel interminably slow.
yeah,
But they're on their journey. And as
yeah,
long as we don't, put them in a box and kind of make them feel small, um, like we don't, just again, the number one thing is remembering that our job is to provide emotional support. And if in certain contexts we can get into offering advice or whatever, but you know what, they're surrounded, they got Google, right? They got friends, they got
yeah.
no shortage of places where they can get advice. And the thing that we're uniquely situated to provide our partner in a couple is that support.
Yep. Yeah, and I would add also that at least 90% of the time they already in some capacity they already know the answer, or at least the answer that they want, and don't need advice from us. That would be my take. That number might be a little higher or lower. Um, and I want to go back to nonviolent communication. The first time I heard that was actually recent. It was like in my mature adult life. Um, and I thought, well, golly, you're telling me to have nonviolent communication. Do you think that I'm threatening violence to my partner or my employees? And I was fascinated that nonviolent communication is not really like having to tone down your cuss words and your threats. It's like it's not as bad as it sounds. I think there should be a better way to describe it. But
Yeah,
yeah.
fair enough.
And what I learned was like, when I said, uh, Cameron, you belittle me when you do this, which would be, a better way to do it would be nonviolent communication. Hey, it makes me feel this way when this happens, instead of the you. And I think we um, collectively as a whole, I think a lot of times we forget those small words can be activators for people. It's accusatory.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a consultant at Pixel Spoke, my company, who always talked about how nobody can argue with your lived experience. So as soon as I start saying,
Yeah.
you know, you're a jerk or you made me feel this
Yeah.
way, then all of a sudden we're kind of
Yeah.
tussling over objective reality. Because if we had, a court of law or whatever, they might see it differently, right? But when I
Right.
say like, man, like after that last time we talked, I felt pretty depressed and alone. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you might. That's not
Right.
advisable, right? Some people still do. But like
Yeah.
people are much less likely to do that when it's like, and they're much more likely to sort of, empathize when they're like, "Oh wow, that was your experience." But at any time I think we get that hint of the other person is trying to tell us what absolute reality is, or why we did something, that then it tends to degrade. It tends to like degrade really quickly into just kind of this ping pong match of who's right and who's wrong, and the reality is no one ever wins at that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's for sure. Um, and then I want to shift now to crucial conversations. I think that you will have some help here for a lot of folks. Crucial conversations in the workplace, crucial conversations at home, in relationships. They're hard, man. And I'll give you my recent experience share. And Cameron, I've consulted with you about this. I'm divorced recently. Obviously, you know that. Um, and any and from past relationships that a breakup of any sort, it takes time to heal, right? So crucial conversations in the workplace, it's imperative. So I found out information that was withheld from me, and then got it recently. I got it Sunday, and I thought, wow, So now this opens that old wound. Now I have to relive that experience. And then I thought, okay, well, what would have happened if I'd been told this 2 years ago? I would be so much further along in the healing process. The conversation is going to come out regardless. So I ended up stretching out this healing process because I get the information later. And what I ended up doing, I said, okay, well, where would I be if I'd heard this 2 years ago? And I was like, I'd probably be right where I am. It doesn't matter. So I said, okay, I heard it 2 years ago, and I just left it at that. So that's how I moved on. But what would you advise to someone, whether it be an entrepreneur couple or couples at home, where they really need to have that crucial conversation and they withhold that conversation in the interest of thinking they're protecting the person? Is there anything that's helpful to just go into the danger?
Mm. Man, you got a lot there, Jeff. Okay, so let me start by sharing. Yeah, I think you talked about, why should we have these conversations? Why should we go into the danger? Um, there's an amazing study by a Russian psychologist. I'm forgetting her first name, but her last name is Zygarnik, and so it's called the Zygarnik effect. And it's something that's like immediately intuitive. But it's a cool story. So she was living in Vienna, and she was fascinated by these huge cafes where a waiter could walk up and serve a table of six, take their order, not write a single thing down, go back to the kitchen, deliver it flawlessly, right? Flawlessly. And they could do this all night long. And so she started getting curious of like, how do they do that, right? And then she started asking, well, what if I interview them right after they drop the order off? And what she found was they couldn't remember anymore, right? So they know, before they get to the kitchen, they remember Jeff Luther. He wants a cappuccino with a little bit of cinnamon and whatever, a cookie on the side, and this. They got it all down. And then if they ask you, I mean, literally like that waiter, 10 seconds after they left the kitchen, hey, what did Jeff want? It's gone. And so they call this the Zygarnik effect because it's basically this idea that our brains are wired to focus on and remember unfinished business. And so this is what happens with these little ruptures. They can be big, but these little ruptures too in our relationships of they just start eating at us. They're like a pebble in our shoe, right? It's like you never wake up at 2 in the morning being like, man, I did such a good job on that project. Maybe I won't say never, right? But it's like you wake up because you're like, oh my God, I forgot to send that letter I said I was going to do. Or, oh my God,
Yep.
we forgot to finalize that piece on the contract. So the idea is that in relationships, not just couples, all relationships, these become like that pebble in our shoe. And by having that conversation, we take that pebble out and it allows us to focus on all the good in the relationship. And I want to add a huge caveat. You talked about kind of entering the danger or entering the fire. So, like, a real question is, why don't we do this, right? If it's like a
Yeah.
rock in our shoe, why don't we just take the rock out? And the reason is we all know we've had times where we said, hey, Jeff, man, like the other day you said that thing to me and I felt really bad and I couldn't sleep and I've been, and you're talking your piece and the other person, you see them getting madder and madder and they're like, well, you do this, and all of a sudden you're off and running, right? You're off to the races. And so a lot of us learn, like, keep the peace, right? Particularly in our relationship or our family of origin or our work, wherever it is, we know that you don't just reach down and pull that pebble out, right? It's something that you do when it works, you do it skillfully. So I think there's a few critical things to think about this. Um, Coming from that autobiographical voice, describing your own lived experience is really important.
Yeah.
Focusing on one issue is really important. We tend to just start kind of like, just like daisy chaining. It's like, and oh, by the way,
Yep.
that felt good to tell you about that one time. And so sticking to just one specific incident.
Pile it
Um,
on.
yeah, exactly. And then asking, this, I didn't get to this, but one of the key points from nonviolent communication and every one of these communication frameworks is figuring out, what do I need from you right now that will make it better, right? We can't go back a week ago and change what you said or whatever it was, right? But what do I need right
Yeah.
now? And we have this really deep internal resistance to often saying, like, you know what, I just need acknowledgement that that felt hard, or I just need an apology, or I just need to know that you do value our friendship. And so that's kind of the next piece. And the last thing I want to say that's really important is when people start using these frameworks, and I'd say they're all cousins. It's very, very important that we start small. So I see this all the time in work and in relationships, that people learn a new tool and they're like, great, let's talk about the worst thing we've ever dealt with between the two of us, as we're like toddlers trying to learn to ride a bicycle, right? So
Yep.
start small to build that competency. And then also lastly, remember that, like, sometimes that resolution can come elsewhere, right? Like, not everybody is going to be willing to play the game, right? If there's not like a healthy emotional bank account and a lot of trust. And some people, right, to go to extreme, like if someone is very mentally ill, I mean, I'll give you, there was a guy near my house and he spat on me. And I could go find him. He's not doing well, man. Like I'm sure he's mentally unwell. He might have been on drugs. He's homeless,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm probably not going to
Mm.
go talk to him and say, hey, like this is my lived experience, yada yada yada. I'd really appreciate a hug or an apology or whatever, right? Like, he'd
Right.
probably curse at me or spit on me again. And so it's like, I can get that support from my wife or my parents or my friends. So just always keeping the context, and not becoming kind of like, sometimes people just become these like evangelists of these frameworks, and they're like, I'm going to use nonviolent communication for everything, or I'm going to have a crucial conversation with everyone. And I like to
Yeah.
just go back to that, that notion of like, you're intelligent, use your brain, like, start small
Yeah.
and pick circumstances where you're likely to have success, because there is no silver bullet for all communication with all people all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of my takeaways from that and what I love is, what can I do for you right now? I use that with my kids. It's okay. Well, what do you need from me right now? I'll add to that the person that you're dealing with has to be in a place where they can accept that question.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
can be sometimes be viewed as a little demeaning, and that's not the intent. At least not my intent.
Yep.
Or
Absolutely.
condescending is probably better. Yeah. Um, this has been fantastic. Thank you. And it's I want to add, it's cool if people reach out to you with additional questions, if they have any questions or they want to run something by you. Is that all right?
Absolutely. I love hearing from people on this. Helping entrepreneurial couples is my passion. There's a free assessment that I can share with people if they want to take it and just kind of see where their relationship is at and get some short video tips on kind of how to improve some of their areas where they could be even stronger. Yeah, no, I love helping couples. I love, I guess I'll close with this, Jeff. I didn't share this, but my passion for this topic comes from three places. One was this realization that I was a total ignoramus about relationships, and of course, I wasn't very good at it. Right? It was like, but it was like a big. So I went crazy. I read like 12 books in the next 2 months or whatever, and I really started learning at that point and applying my curiosity to it. The second one, of course, is that, I love my wife and we're human beings and we have ups and downs all the time. And so, like, I have a deep personal interest in this topic, right? But my last kind of
Yeah.
interest, and this is where I think it really what inspires me to want to go work with other couples and support them however I can, is I was really lucky. I grew up in a really close, loving family. Um, and I know what their relationship did for me. And so I think, I've had all my own, challenges throughout life as well, but I think that secure base that they gave me is the gift that we can give our partner. And if we have kids, the gift that we can give to our kids. And so I just think the importance of working on our relationship should not be understated because it is literally, the foundation of the human species. We are built on these close familial units. And it does profound things for our nervous systems, for our immune systems, like our mental well-being, our emotional well-being. It is a big gift that we can give. And so I love supporting couples who want to give that gift to each other or their kids or their communities or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, love and connection, right? That's one of the six basic human needs. I mean, it's probably the biggest.
Yep.
Um, Cameron, I really appreciate your time. This has been so helpful for me. And then if you were going to recommend just one book, if someone's listening, and I don't, is your book's not done yet, is it?
No, I'm just
Is it?
starting it, so can't recommend that yet.
Okay. Can't recommend that one. We'll circle back for that one. If you're going to recommend one, could you recommend one?
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of great books. Can I recommend three?
Oh yeah, man. And I did not prepare you for this actually. I mean, it's hard
No,
to
no,
recommend a book. I get it. Yeah, go for it. Three would be awesome.
yeah. I just have so many I like. So I would say that, and I think it might be the most popular relationship book of all time, but if you've not read The Five Love Languages, that to me is like the starter book. It is so simple and so powerful. And I think for so many couples, it's just like this first huge step forward. Um, the second one I would recommend is called The Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work, and that's by John Gottman, and he and his wife, Dr. Julie Schwartz Gottman, are the folks who invented Gottman method therapy. She's an incredible clinician, PhD, and so on. That book is just like if you want to understand relationships, it's all in there. It's incredible. Like relationships are really a solved problem. We just don't know it because there's so much to it, and we weren't trained in this. We didn't take relationships 101 in
Yeah.
college. So that book is incredible. It's got so many tools. It's got so much insight. Um, and then, the last one I would say is for couples if they're feeling really estranged, or kind of there's that lack of connection, um, then I think Dr. Sue Johnson's book Hold Me Tight, which is all about attachment theory, which is, this basic notion that as human beings, on a deep, deep level, we are primarily wired to have this close connection with someone that is, and it starts out as a child with a parent, but as adults, it turns into that, partner relationship, and that connection
Hmm.
is like the basis. It's the secure base from which we go out and explore the world, and that enables us to actually become more deeply integrated as an individual. And that are like one thing that's fascinating is that our bodies are actually primed to rely on others. So they actually expect to get this degree of support and resource from others. And that book really kind of goes into why that might not be happening in your relationship. And it's pretty beautiful and pretty deep. So those would be my big three.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Man, that's exciting that you're getting your master's. I had no idea. So good luck there. And man, I mean, I'm genuine when I say thank you so much for carving out the time to talk with me today for our folks. CameronMadill.com, right?
That's
Is
it.
that the
And,
easiest place to find you?
thanks for having me. Easiest place to find me.
Awesome. All right, dude. All right, I'm Jeff Luther with the Service Business Blueprint. We had Cameron Madill on today for relationships, and I always love being here and learning, and I can't wait to see you guys next time. Cameron, thanks a ton.
Thanks for hanging out on the Service Business Blueprint with me, Jeff Luther. Stay in the loop as we keep delivering these strategies to supercharge your service business. Hit subscribe, leave a review, be part of our growing community. Now you have someone to walk with you as we create your service business blueprint. Until next time, remember, where you focus is where your energy goes. Beliefs turn to things, so choose the good ones.